Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Bruce Heery and I am president of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. The Bar Association is a center for professional excellence here in Cleveland, and I am honored to be here on behalf of our 6,000 members. It is my specific pleasure today to introduce Tom Mesereau, our 2015 Law Day celebration speaker. Law Day was established by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1958. At the time, he said, "The world no longer has a choice between force and law. If civilization is to survive, it must choose the rule of law." This is obviously still true today as we think about what's going on around the world and in Baltimore, Maryland, and even in our city. The American Bar Association always has a theme for Law Day. This year it's the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta stands for the enduring truth that no one is above the law. Rights we sometimes take for granted, like due process, habeas corpus, and trial by jury, originated in that document. Tom Mesereau and I were born 2 weeks apart, about 100 miles apart on the East Coast. We grew up in the great television age of the 50s and the 60s. While the 50s gave us Perry Mason, it was an early 1960s lawyers show, The Defenders, that stood out for me. The show starred E.G. Marshall and Robert Reed as a father-son duo of intrepid defense lawyers. In this groundbreaking show, they defended unpopular causes such as abortion, child abuse, atheism, neo-Nazism, and euthanasia, among other themes. The series has been described as the most socially conscious the medium has ever seen, and a show that was singularly resonant with the new frontier liberalism. Tom Mesereau is the embodiment of the defender. His website biography is replete with his many highly publicized courtroom victories. But he has been invited here today as much for his other achievements, his lifelong commitment to pro bono work and charitable activities in the pursuit of justice. His accolades, tributes, and awards are rich and long. In 2005, he was interviewed by Barbara Walters as one of her most interesting people. He is still fascinating today. Tom and I, besides being born in the same month and year, share another thing in common. We graduated from the same prep school. That school's motto, non sibi, translates to not for oneself, calling its alumni to lives of service. Tom Mesereau personifies such a life. After graduating from Harvard, the London School of Economics, and the University of California Hastings College of Law, Tom has crafted a legal career of tremendous public recognition and success and remarkable private giving. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club, on behalf of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce today's Law Day speaker, Tom Mesereau.
Thank you. Bruce, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you, City Club, for this very, very generous invitation. To members of the bar, the judiciary, to our high school students who really hold the key to our future, to everyone present, thank you very much for this kind invitation. The subject of pro bono work is something very dear to my heart. And when I approach this subject, I approach it from two angles. One, what pro bono work does to the community, and two, what it does for me, and hopefully what it will do for other lawyers if they consider doing more of it. I got out of law school and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my career. Fortunately, a law degree gives one many, many options. It gives one more options than any other degree I can think of. And I was able to make use of those options to find out where I belonged in society and where I belonged in this profession. I started with a very big civil litigation firm in Washington, D.C. I then was a deputy district attorney in Southern California. I was with a corporation for a few years, assisting the president in hiring lawyers, and I would run around the country supervising lawyers. And eventually I realized that everything interested me for a while. But the question was, where would I find passion? Because the key to a good life is passion. You can't put a price on passion. Passion lets you get up every day and do the things you like to do and live a very worthwhile life. And a law degree helped me find that passion. I also had to face the fact that I was kind of a loner and a misfit and a renegade. And if you have those qualities, there's nothing better than being a criminal defense lawyer, okay? Nothing better. I started reaching out to nonprofit groups in Los Angeles. I began to donate my time at free legal clinics at African American churches in South Central Los Angeles, and eventually formed my own nonprofit and my own free legal clinic. And the joy and the fulfillment and the satisfaction I, as a person and as a lawyer, have gotten from this is immeasurable. The Mesereau Free Legal Clinic operates out of a church in the African American community in South Los Angeles. We meet 2 Saturday mornings a month. Lawyers, law students, college students, activists donate their time. And we encourage people from the community to come with whatever problem they have, whether it's a criminal problem, whether it's divorce, whether it's probate, whether it's a business issue, whether they think their rights have been violated in any number of different ways. We encourage them to come. We encourage them to come, and we don't guarantee any result. We don't guarantee we can take the case, but we guarantee they have an ear to speak to whenever they want. We have people who come in with problems that are just impossible to describe. I talked to a woman recently who had 2 sons doing life in prison. They've been doing life for the last 10, 15 years. She wanted someone to talk to. I told her she has someone to talk to anytime she wants to come. We have other people with pending legal problems that we can handle. People involved in mortgage fraud who've had to lose their home through fraudulent means. People who have problems with their children. People who don't know if there's even a legal solution to the problem bothering them, but they have a place to come and people to talk to. And last but not least, we have problems with lawyers in poor communities. Lawyers who steal money, lawyers who make promises, lawyers who feel that if it ever comes to a dispute before the bar, with their articulate, educated approach, they will out-talk and outwit whoever they stole from. And we have to deal with those problems too, because there are people in our profession, like every other profession, that are unethical and steal money and make promises they shouldn't make. Nevertheless, this kind of work, along with benefiting the community, benefits your spirit, benefits your soul, gives you passion, and allows you to make a difference. And I love free legal clinics. And I've encouraged others to start free legal clinics. You know, very often in society you see competition. Whatever sector you're in, people want to outdo others. People think they're better than others. We encourage anyone to come and take our forms, take our procedures, learn from us, and duplicate it if they can. Okay, it's something that we really think is something that can be repeated, and I'm very honored to know that some other free legal clinics have started, but there's a problem. The problem is economics. In our society, particularly right now, the cost of education is enormous. The cost of housing is enormous. In the last recession, the jobs in the legal profession contracted. And when you try and tell people, do something free, do something that helps others rather than just yourself, it's a tough road. It's a tough road. But we have a profession which we have so many options, so many things we can do. And unfortunately, a lot of members of this profession don't know that. Since I was in law school, consistently, more than half of lawyers surveyed say they're unhappy with what they do. And of course, what they don't realize is if they took the valuable education and skills they have and tried to give to the community and give to others in a selfless way, they would feel far better about themselves and about their profession and about the career choices they have made. Now, let me give an example of a young woman I met a number of years ago in Los Angeles. There's a bar restaurant that typically I've gone to for years. I'll sit there alone, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, have a couple of glasses of wine, think my thoughts, think about what I'm doing, what tomorrow's going to bring. And she served me a glass of wine one night, and it turned out she was a student at UCLA. She was majoring in philosophy. She was a white girl from a white community called Whittier. She'd never been in the inner city in her life. Her parents didn't want her to go. They were scared of the inner city. We started talking. I said, what are you going to do with your degree? She said, well, I major in philosophy. I thought of being a lawyer, and 7 lawyers told me don't do it. So I'm going to be an accountant, is what she said. Well, I said to her, well, this is the 8th lawyer you've talked to, and I'm telling you, do it. okay? And we started talking, and I told her about my free clinic. She said she wanted to come. And she wanted to meet me at a coffee place and wanted me to take her to my clinic. And of course, her parents had a fit. Who was this older guy with this long gray hair who was taking her into the inner city, you know? And I did it. And she came to my clinic, and she started off as a paralegal. Paralegals are usually non-lawyers, people in law school or college, who will take an intake form. They'll sit down with someone who came to the clinic for help. They'll get the basic information, they'll bring it back to the staff will assign a lawyer to the problem, and then they'll all sit at a table and start discussing the problem. The paralegal, the lawyer, the people who need assistance. She started doing it and she fell in love with the clinic. She never missed a day. She absolutely volunteered every second she could to help with the clinic, to help with administration, to help with trying to do some fundraising, to learn what lawyers do, and to learn the kinds of problems that exist in the inner city. And then she said to me, do you do any other things? And I said, well, there's some other organizations I'm part of. She said, I want to come with you and see what goes on. I want to participate. And I told her about the Women of Watts. We have projects in LA called the Watts Projects that are among the most violent. The Crips control one housing project, the Bloods control another. The level of violence is extreme. LA is a city plagued with gang violence, particularly to this day. All of a sudden, there was a lull for a while, but now it has increased. And young lives are being taken every day. It's just atrocious. She wanted to come and march with the Women of Watts and their children through the projects against gang violence, which I do every year. I help organize this march, and she just loved it. She says to me, what else do you like to do, Tom? I said, well, you know, there's a little organization. I was there the day it was founded 10 years ago. It's called An Action Family Network. It's an organization comprised of women who go into the jails and have a reentry program where they counsel women who've had drug problems, et cetera. And also we're focusing on homeless children, because a fact that I still can't believe, the average age of a homeless person in Los Angeles is 9 years old. We have motels in the inner city that are filled with homeless children. They bounce from hotel to hotel. They try to survive their way. Society doesn't really know much about them or even do very much. So in our small organization, we focus on this as well. So she wanted to come and participate in that. And to make a long story short, she's in her 3rd year of law school. She loves law school. She can't wait to be a practicing attorney. Her internships in the summer had been with other public interest organizations. She was involved with a homeless project dealing with the rights of the homeless, helping lawyers put together lawsuits to protect homeless rights. She found a calling. She found a calling. She didn't listen to all that negativity that came out of the 7 lawyers she talked to. And by the way, when she told me about what those 7 lawyers had to say, I said to her, did they tell you what to do instead, any of them? And she said, no, no. This was just negativity from people who are selfish, self-oriented, can't get out of their own way, and don't realize what power they have. To our students here, and I'm so honored that you're here, please consider being lawyers. Please consider being lawyers. It gives you power and opportunity and options that I don't think any other degree will give you. The question is, how imaginative are you in terms of using those options and knowing they exist? The question is, what do you really want to do for your community? What do you want to do for your neighborhood? What do you want to do for the city? What do you want to do for the country? Because there's a fundamental problem we're seeing on television. We look at Baltimore, we look at South Carolina, we look at the problems that are being exposed with our police departments. And fundamentally, there's a problem, and it's called, do I count? What value am I? Society has a way of choosing people and devaluing those people, okay? It can be done directly, it can be done very indirectly. It can be done in an overt way, right in your face. It can be done in subtle ways. But when someone wakes up in the community and realizes I've been devalued, that I don't count, they act out, okay? And our society does it constantly. I look at Los Angeles, which I consider to be the most segregated city in America. It is spread out wide, and there's a culture that people don't go into other neighborhoods. Public transportation is not the same type of thing you find in New York or Cleveland or Chicago. It's spread out. People don't drive to other neighborhoods. They only learn about them by watching television. And television has a way of devaluing neighborhoods and people as well. You talk about South Los Angeles, which I've been describing. People from the west side of town, an affluent white neighborhood, they'll look at TV and all they see is gang violence and car chases. That's what they think poor communities are. That's all they think exists. And there's a problem with that. I faced that problem when I became a criminal defense lawyer. I had to learn how to pick juries. I defended a lot of gang members charged with serious crimes. And the question was, how do I humanize my client in a courtroom in front of a jury filled with people who know nothing about the neighborhood, nothing about the crises and the problems young people face, particularly in Los Angeles. And I had to learn to make my client a human being, but first I had to understand who the person was and where they came from and how they lived and what obstacles they faced and what obstacles they faced every day when they walked out the door. I speak at high schools in Los Angeles. I'll very often ask students, how many of you are affiliated with gangs? There are some huge high schools in Los Angeles and 90% will say I'm affiliated with a gang. My grandfather was in a gang. My uncle was in a gang. My cousins were in gangs. The violence is multi-generational. The scores to settle are multi-generational. And some young people don't want to be in gangs, but they have no choice but to deal with gangs in a way that they can to survive, to get onto the school ground, to get home. And what happens is people who are not from the community and don't understand it and don't care about it, they just blindly stereotype everybody as a gangbanger. And you get young prosecutors who aren't from the inner city, aren't from these neighborhoods, and they convince themselves everybody's a gangbanger. And I tell these young kids, you got to understand what happens in a gang trial, okay? You see that tattoo you're wearing, that's going to be blown up and shown to a jury. You see that nickname you have? I've defended Little Hitman, Mad Mo, all these wild nicknames. They're going to show that to a jury, okay? And they're going to devalue you and your family and your neighborhood right off the bat, because they don't know any better. They don't know any better. We have to explain who you are. We have to explain what obstacles you face. We have to explain how you were raised. And we have to deal with this problem in a human way. The way for a lawyer to deal with that is to be involved, not to just see someone as a client, not just to see someone as part of the business I do, someone as a human being. And the way to learn about people maybe you didn't grow up with, people maybe from neighborhoods you weren't part of, is to go into the community and give yourself every way you can to help out. And pro bono work will make you a better lawyer. It will make you a better citizen. It will teach others to understand and respect the legal profession. And I'm very honored to be a criminal defense attorney. I'm very honored to do the pro bono work I do. And I think everyone benefits. So let me explain a couple of other things because our time is limited. At my clinic, judges come to speak. We have a federal judge who, to my surprise, will sometimes show up unannounced because he likes the things we do. He typically speaks about the drug laws, how they work in federal court, how they work in state court. And when people see a federal judge come into their community at the clinic, when they see state judges come, they feel empowered. They feel like they're part of the community. They feel that somebody cares about them, and everybody benefits. One judge who has spoken at our clinic has instituted the following program in Los Angeles. It's a program where if a high school student is charged with a misdemeanor that's considered nonviolent, for example, drug sales, okay? And if both sides will agree, prosecution and defense, which they usually do, they will find a neutral high school and try that case at that high school. The jury will be composed of high school students at that neutral high school. When I say neutral, it's a high school where none of the witnesses, are associated with the school. They'll try the case at the high school. It gives everyone a sense of participation. It teaches those high school students what the criminal justice system is all about and how important they are as jurors or whatever role they play in that trial. It actually takes cases out of the court system, which is hopelessly clogged. We're actually closing courthouses in Los Angeles because of the economic problems. And everybody participates, everybody counts, everybody has value, and everyone benefits. No losers in that system. No losers in pro bono work either, because I tell lawyers and law students who are just scrambling, trying to find a role for themselves, a way to make a difference, a way to maintain some of the ideals that they had in law school, which dropped away with the rigors of law practice and the competitiveness of law practice and the competitiveness of trying to make a living and raise your family. I tell them this is a way to recapture those ideals, and it's easy to do. You just do whatever you can and help out. We have small organizations in Los Angeles that are really on the street level. Save Our Sons is an organization formed by African-American mothers whose sons are in prison. I've helped them out for years. They have a clinic dealing with expungement, things like that. I've spoken and given my time when I could to them. My dear friend, Dr. Dolores Aline, is a medical doctor. She was the first female to graduate from the University of Louisville Medical School. She has 3 daughters who are doctors and nurses. She has 1 son who's doing life in prison for a crime she says he did not commit. And she formed this organization to deal with issues involving African-American males in the justice system. She has guest speakers. She has a prison ministry. She is devoting a large portion of her life to this project. She feels her son was very unjustly treated and should not be in prison. And there are organizations like this, I'm sure, in Cleveland, in every community that I've ever spoken at, and they need help. They need participation. But one thing I want to say to our high school students, you know, when you get out of school, life can be difficult, and making a living can have its ups and downs. I'm someone who likes freedom. I don't like being a slave. I don't like to be limited to one subject matter. And I don't like to be stuck in an organization that maybe I like or don't like, okay? I'm a loner. I'm an individual. And with a law degree, I was able to find a place for me and a place to make a difference and a place where I think I count and the people I represent count. I'm someone who just likes to see things myself, okay? I actually dropped out of law school my first year. For a while, I thought of being a journalist. I had this idea that I was going to be an international correspondent, and I'd majored in international affairs. I had a master's degree in it. And I thought long and hard. I interviewed with some of the networks. I got offered some jobs, and I decided I really wanted to go to law school. But I was able to check things out myself, make decisions myself. When you're representing someone in the criminal justice system, you have an ability to find out who that human being is in every way, if you care, if you want to. Trials are artificial recreations of reality. They're not reality, okay? We have to have a justice system. We need law and order. People need to pay certain prices for certain things they do or choices they make, and people need to be safe. But trials are not reality. They're an artificial recreation of what people claim happened somewhere else in some other part of town. And they operate according to procedures and laws that are always changing because we're always learning how imperfect this system is. And there is a tremendous amount of injustice out there. I mean, close to 300 people now have been released with DNA, people facing the death penalty, people facing life in prison for things they didn't do, people who were convicted because they were devalued the moment they walked in a courtroom, because somebody looked at them and said, "I'll never forget that face," someone who had no idea who they were identifying, or someone who the police told them to identify or encouraged them to identify. It's not a perfect system. And anytime a lawyer with commitment and character and integrity dives into that system and defends people who are charged with crimes, you are making this system work better. You know, still at this stage in my career, people say to me, "Could you represent a guilty person?" The answer is absolutely. Of course I could. You know, not only do I want to see innocent people acquitted, and not only do I want to see people who aren't guilty of the particular crimes they're charged with exonerated in one form or another, I want to see this system work. I want to see prosecutors and police think twice before they bring cases because they know the person they're facing is going to give them a real run for their money, and they might get embarrassed. And maybe they'll think twice about what they're doing and whether they're really devaluing somebody who just isn't guilty of that kind of a crime, or shouldn't be in the courtroom. Now, when I go to high schools and speak in some of these neighborhoods, I tell young people, you know, do you know what goes on in these courtrooms? Do you know what aiding and abetting means? Do any of you high school students know what aiding and abetting means? Let me tell you what it means. It means if you jump in a car with somebody and you have no intention of committing a crime, you don't have a gun, you don't have drugs, you don't have a knife, you have no ill intentions, and somebody in that car does something, you could get charged and be facing life in prison because they'll come up with some idea that you were just providing assistance or encouragement to the person. That's what aiding and abetting is. Young people don't realize what trouble they can get into just by being in the proximity. And young people don't realize how the system may devalue them because of where they come from. If you become lawyers, which I certainly hope a lot of you can fight against this stuff, okay? You can really make a difference. You can protect people who need protection in your community. You can make the system work. You can look at somebody being devalued by a prosecutor or a police officer, and you can say, I'm going to make them pay for that. Okay, I'm going to embarrass the daylights out of them. I'm going to make sure the truth comes out in this courtroom. And you know something? It's empowering. It's meaningful. It gives you a passion. It gives you a sense of involvement, and it teaches you to teach others to have a sense of involvement and to be passionate about what they do. Pro bono work is a wonderful way of conducting your life, and it's a way where nobody loses. There are no losers, okay? The only losers in our profession are the ones who don't see the value in it, who just go around in a selfish, narcissistic way and make a living and just wonder why they're not terribly fulfilled. But if you go to law school, you'll be shocked at what options you have. You'll be surprised at what things you can try. And if you don't like them, whether it's business, whether it's working for the government, whether it's working for a prosecuting office or a public defender's office, whether it's opening up a business with a friend, saying, look, let's rent this space, let's practice law, let's help the community. You can do that. And one good thing about today is that with high tech, the costs of opening an office are actually a lot less than they ever were. When I got out of law school, the thought was you got to have a physical library, you got to have a paralegal in your office, you got to have a secretary. You can do a lot of this stuff now online. And the costs of opening an office are less. But don't a lot of you want to be independent in your life? Don't you want to have a lot of choices about what you do? Wouldn't you like to make an impact? Like to make a difference? Like to walk out the door and like what you do and feel like you're really making a difference? With a law degree, you can do that. I don't know any other degree that gives you those options. I'm not telling you not to be a teacher or a PhD if that's something you want. If that's your passion, that's what it is. But if you're really not sure, with education comes freedom. The more education, the more freedom you have. And you are the wave of the future, not the rest of us. You're the wave of the future. You're what tomorrow's going to be. You all are powerful members of society, and don't let anyone suggest you're not. You have tremendous power to make change, to bring fairness to the world, to bring fairness to this society, and to make people stand up and say, I'm going to do the right thing. You're not going to cover up anything in my community. You devalue people, you debase people, you're going to pay a price for it. With a law degree, you can do that, okay? And it took me a while to figure it out. I didn't know that right away. Got out of law school kind of confused. If you ever said to me when I got out of law school that at this age I'd be saying what a great thing a law degree is, I would have like, what? You know, I don't know where I belong, you know, but I could find it out. I could find it out. Pro bono work is wonderful. Giving back to the community gives you a great feeling of satisfaction. You can make a difference, and a difference that few other people can make, and you are very, very fortunate if you go to law school and get a law degree. I want to thank everyone for this kind invitation. I'm so honored. When I got the invitation, I saw the list of prior speakers, and I gulped. I said, wait a minute, you know. But this is just a great opportunity, and I wish all of these students the best of luck, and just consider education. It is freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm Dan Moulthrop, Chief Executive here at the City Club, and today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're enjoying a Friday forum with Thomas A. Mesereau, Jr., Principal at Mesereau Law Group and co-founder of the Mesereau Free Legal Clinic. We encourage you to organize your questions for our speaker now and ask that your questions be brief and to the point. If you're joining us via our live web stream at cityclub.org or via our friends at WCPN, you can tweet your questions with the hashtag CityClub, and we'll try to work them in. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS 104.9 Idea Stream, that's our primary media partner, or one of the many other radio stations across the region and country that carry City Club programs. Radio and television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Be sure to join us on Friday, May 8th, for a panel discussion on millennials and entrepreneurship featuring Andrew Yang. He's the founder and CEO of Venture for America. For information about our upcoming and past forums, you're invited to join us at cityclub.org. Today's forum, our annual Law Day Forum, is presented in collaboration with the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. We thank you very much for your support. And our community partner for today's program is the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland. We thank you very much for your support. We also welcome the Stokes Scholars and students from Shaw High School to today's program. Student participation is made possible by a generous grant from the Loeb Foundation. Could all the students please stand to be recognized? It's wonderful to see so many future leaders and lawyers in the room. Now we would, future lawyers and lawyers. And anyway, now we would like to return to our speaker for the traditional City Club Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests and students. Holding our microphones today are City Club volunteer Spencer Kiesel and our content associate, Teddy Eisenberg. Our first question, please.
For the non-attorneys in the room and listening, can you share with us, when you're in a jury trial, do you think from the jury's perspective that the verbal, the vocal, or the visual that you or your defendant say and show, what is most important to the jury? The verbal, the vocal, or the visual?
Well, I mean, the easy answer would be all are, but you know, some of the psychological studies suggest that visual is more easily retained than verbal, but everything is important. And I think American juries, wherever they sit, take their job very seriously. When they take an oath, I think they change. You know, we're all human, none of us are perfect, and that includes people who sit on a jury, and that includes the jury as a whole. Mistakes are made. But I do think juries do their very, very best to see and hear and understand everything that's going on in the courtroom, to follow the judge's instructions very carefully. And I think our juries do the best they can to do what's right. And I do think we have the best criminal justice system in the world. It's far from perfect. It has a lot of problems. But because of the way our laws are written, because prosecutors have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, because they're what is called a presumption of innocence, because a lot of these procedural and legal safeguards exist, and because we have jury trials in criminal cases, and we're allowed to remove certain number of jurors. In England, you have jury trials in criminal cases, but there's no removal of jurors. The first 12, they sit there. We have, you know, depending on the locality, you know, certain ability to remove some jurors. But I think, I mean, everything is important. Jurors come in with whatever they come in with. Some are more intuitive than others, some are more instinctive than others, some more intellectual than others, but they take their job very seriously and they try to do what's right. And again, there's a lot of lore out there about using certain visuals. There's also lore out there about trying to not be too fancy in this high-tech age. There's also lore out there that says people expect high-tech presentations. You have to figure out kind of what's credible and what you think is consistent with who you are as a lawyer, and you know, what your client faces, what the evidence is likely to be, and what kind of a story you plan to tell. That's the answer I can give you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mesereau. My name is Anthony Price. I'm a junior at Shaw High School. And in saying that, I just want to say you inspired me and hit all the key points of why I wanted to pursue a career in law. And I was also told to say that I was an attorney on my high school mock trial team as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so in saying that, for someone that wants to pursue a career in law and wants to do pro bono work, what gives you that drive or push? What motivation should they look for as far as to do that work? Because I'm sure it can be depressing. Well, not depressing. I'm sure it could be disappointing. It can be hard and stressful in a time. So what gives you that motivation
I think
to
a
do
concern for people. I think a certain level of compassion for others. I'd like to think I'm, you know, as much as I can be, a kind person. One thing about law school and the legal profession, it can squeeze out qualities like compassion, kindness. It really can. It really can. Look at civil litigation. I mean, civil litigators, you know, if there's anything that will dehumanize you quickly, it's these battles in a civil context where I often, you know, I don't know how much you know about civil litigation, but all these depositions and all of these evasive answers and all this paperwork and attacks that go back and forth, a lot of it can have a very dehumanizing effect on a person. one thing pro bono work will do is, listen, you have to make a living too. You know, we can't just do everything free. But I mean, one thing pro bono work will do is combat that dehumanizing tendency that legal practice and, you know, everything's conflict in the law. You're always fighting somebody. You're always trying to outmaneuver somebody. And it can get kind of nasty at times. And in the process, it can get very dehumanizing. It can be very unprofessional, very impolite. But caring about people to the point where you will help them without getting much money in return, I think counteracts that very effectively. It's just a question of do you care about people or not? Do you care about your community or not? Do you want to make a difference or not? This is one way to approach it. And I'm just so lucky I found it, because I was just wandering around, you know, trying. Everything I tried I liked, because I'm curious about people. I did transactional work. I did civil litigation. I didn't like being a prosecutor. I didn't like high-fiving with others when someone who had every obstacle against them got convicted, and I just didn't like it. When I began as a prosecutor, I was assigned to juvenile court. I took a tour of juvenile court. Part of that tour was looking through a window in a metal door, and that was a suicide room. And there was a little girl on suicide watch. And I saw her just sitting there alone. And then I went through my tour and my orientation. Then I discovered to my horror that the first case I had to try she was the defendant, accused of shoplifting. And I looked at her file. And she had been sexually abused, emotionally abused. The first thing she did when she got into juvenile hall was look for typewriter fluid to sniff. Just a tragic background. And I was being asked to prosecute her for something that no prosecutor could lose. And she was convicted, and I went back to my office, and everybody wanted to congratulate me, and I didn't want to shake their hands at all. I didn't feel good about it one bit. I didn't belong in that office. It wasn't for me. That's my answer. Congratulations with all your accomplishments, by the way.
Further to your point that our justice system is not a perfect system, in fact, I think there's some pretty appalling statistics about the injustice of the justice system. Looking at wrongful incarceration of people of color, particularly African Americans, wrongful convictions. So what would you tell our young people here today in terms of why they should believe in a system that is flawed and in many ways really looks broken? What would you tell our young people?
Well, I would tell you this. We have to have a system of justice. We have to have a way to control the level of violence and the level of conflict in society. We have to have a system of justice to really be safe in any shape or form. But our system is not perfect. It never will be perfect. It won't be perfect because it's composed of human beings. 100 years from now, we're still going to be finding imperfections in the system. Laws and procedures are still going to be undergoing change to try and make the system better. We're still going to be learning more and more about what happens in courtrooms that's good or bad. But that's just life, okay? Well, human beings are not perfect. But our system, in my opinion, is the best. I look around the world and I see other systems where, you know, you just go in front of a judge or you go in front of 3 judges and they might be political appointees or whatever, and there may be a hidden agenda going into that trial where there's no time to really analyze the evidence, where people are just thrown into courtrooms very quickly. Appeals take a day or whatever. I mean, you look at some of the things going on around the world and it looks like there's a justice system, but it seems to be more injustice than justice to me. I think our system is the best, but it's very flawed. It's always going to be a battle to get the most amount of freedom and justice and fairness that you can out of the system. You'll never completely overcome the flaws, but it's a battle that we have to fight, and it's well worth fighting. That's how I see it.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Amina Vargas.
Hi.
I'm from the class of Stokes Scholars from 2013.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My question is, a lot of us view the cost for law school as very daunting. So are there any unconventional ways or points of access to financial aid that you know of that people might not have explored as often, or anything that you know of, people we can contact or anything like that?
You know, I'm not an expert on that subject. I've met people in California that are going to other states. I ran into a young person who left California and went to Nebraska to go to law school because it was less expensive. but I'm not an authority on that. It is expensive, and it's generated a real debate in the profession as to whether it's worth it. And I've gotten in some real verbal brawls with people who say, too few jobs, if you can't go to one of the better schools, do something else. And I always look at them and say, well, what should someone do? And, would you want to do it, To me, given the way my life has gone, as I suggested before, I don't know any other degree that would have given me the sense of independence that I have, the freedom to just run my own show, to walk into court and defend people and fight, strong odds, to cut my own path, my own identity. A law degree has let me do that. I can't put a price on what a law degree has given me. I can't. I can't say everybody else feels that way, but I just look around, and particularly, knowing what I know about life, that it's up and down, and one moment we can be up, and the next moment we can be down. A tragedy can strike, an economic collapse can strike, financial problems. I can't think of a better way to reinvent yourself, to recreate yourself, to rise up when things go bad than having a law degree. As I said, you can, you may be the kind of person that feels better in an organization, and suddenly the organization goes down the drain, and you're left on the street, and you call up a friend and say, let's start a law practice, let's start a law practice. We can pay the rent, we can pay the expenses, and who knows where it's going to build to. And, you can be someone who's not really a trial lawyer or a courtroom lawyer, and suddenly adverse circumstances hit, and you say, I got to learn how to try some cases. I never thought I would ever do it. And you go to court, and you start seeing what goes on in courtrooms, and you ask public defenders, and you ask lawyers, what's going on? Can you tell me why you did this and why you did that? I did a lot of that at one point when I realized criminal defense is what I wanted. So there's so many ways you can use that degree to your advantage. And I think education saves lives. As I say, I've had some real ugly verbal battles with some of my colleagues who, in my opinion, have gotten too elitist, too content with themselves, and they're telling other people, don't go to law school, do something else, go into healthcare, go into computers, go into this. And I get upset because I know people from the inner city, and they'll tell me that law school saved my life, college saved my life. My neighborhood was plagued with violence, plagued with problems. I would be there if I hadn't been educated, and now I can make a difference. I've had so many people tell me that. There's a law school in Los Angeles that is changing, and that carved out a very unique identity for many, many years. It was a law school that truly went into the inner city and tried to convince people, particularly African-American women, to be lawyers, to go to law school, and tried to find financial ways they could do that. And a lot of our African-American female judges in Los Angeles went to that law school, and will tell you that that law school helped me get where I am. And they would encourage single moms who no one had ever said, go to law school. And they'd say, how am I going to do it? They would find ways for them to do it. And now, because of other financial pressures, getting federal aid, they're sort of changing some of their standards, in my opinion, and making things a little less subjective, a little less individualistic. And I told the dean I don't like it. You have a special identity in this city. Look what you've done, and these are conflicting pressures. Everybody needs funding, that kind of thing. But I just, I can't tell you exactly where to find the aid. I just don't know enough about that. But I can tell you that I think it's worth it. I just do. What price? Freedom. And with a law degree, you're much more free. So I see it. And congratulations on everything you've done. Hi.
As an attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland, and on behalf of my 41 full-time attorney colleagues and our 2,000 volunteers, we very much appreciate your message today. But even if we got 2,000 more pro bono volunteers at Legal Aid, we still aren't able to help everyone who's coming to our doors every day. There is a considerable need for civil legal aid. Besides pro bono work, what other solutions do you see for the incredible need in our community today for civil legal assistance?
I think, first of all, I think to answer your question, I'd have to reveal some certain things I feel about human nature. I think people, if unchecked, have a fundamental desire to devalue somebody, to make themselves look better. It happens within ethnic groups, it happens between ethnic groups, it happens within religious groups and between religious groups, it happens within national groups and between national groups. Human beings, unfortunately, unless they learn this is wrong, have a tendency to want to look down on somebody, to make themselves feel better, okay? And I think in our inner cities, this society has devalued people in many different ways. Okay, I mean, I look at the gang problem in LA, where the Crips and Bloods were founded. Can our society solve this? Yes. Does our society want to? No. Do the politicians in Washington think this is a high priority? No. Okay? So what happens? Kids are on the street and their family becomes the gang. It becomes their identity, their protection. It becomes their value system. It becomes their history. It becomes their past and their present and their future. And society is not spending enough time teaching people what value they have, that they don't have to do this kind of thing, or they can get out of this kind of thing. We release people from prison, we give them a suit of clothes and a couple of $100, and we dump them in their communities. They can't get a job with their felony convictions. Nobody cares whether they live or die. What do you expect to happen? Could society solve these problems if society thought it was the highest priority? Yes. Society could provide more education, could provide more direction. Anti-gang programs could be much more numerous and much more sophisticated. But does society do it? No. I try a capital case in Alabama almost every year, or either try it or we resolve it. I've done it for 18 years, all pro bono. And I look at these young African-American men in Birmingham, which has one of the highest per capita homicide rates in the country, where kids will shoot other kids for $50. And I see nobody giving them direction. If they wander into a church, they have a chance to get some advice. But no anti-gang programs, nothing to give these young people direction, okay? Could society do something about it? Yes. Does it want to? No. So in answer to your question, I think lawyers need to go into our schools whenever possible to encourage young people to get an education, to tell them what being a lawyer is like, to tell them what a future they have, to let them know you have value and you can accomplish almost anything you want. I've spoken at schools for years, and these kids will look at me and say, you think I can be a lawyer? Nobody ever told them they could be. Nobody ever told them go to college. You count. You can make a big difference. Nobody told it to them. That's my answer. Okay. Hi.
Hi, my name is Watika Holly. I'm a junior at Shaw High School. And my question is, do you think that the crime rate has anything to do with the literacy rate?
Yes. Yes. I think with increased literacy becomes the possible, with increased literacy and education, comes the possibility that someone will realize they can make a tremendous difference. Okay, and if you realize you count and you can make a difference, that, in my opinion, I'm being very general and very simplistic, can have a significant effect on crime. Because if you think you have a chance, and if you think you can make a difference, and if you think you can make a decent living and give your family a decent living, that, to me, militates against this desperate need to survive through crime. But as I said before, if prisons in California keep dumping people in their communities with a few $100 and a suit of clothes and say, you know, see you later, and nobody will hire them. Now, I mentioned the Save Our Sons organization that my friend Dr. Aline formed. They have job fairs where they actually find out what companies will hire ex-felons. My clinic, and we looked at a 4-year period. We actually counseled over 700 people who were trying to find a way to re-enter society, who wanted their convictions expunged if they could, and if they couldn't expunge them, in California we have what is called a certificate of rehabilitation, where if you go through certain procedures and do certain things, you have this certificate to show an employer who may have reservations about your criminal record that, you know, I'm not what you think I am. But the answer is, of course, with education comes freedom, with education comes a sense that I count and that I can make a difference, and in my opinion, that has a good chance of reducing the crime rate.
Mr. Mesereau, we have a question from Twitter that I'm going to ask.
Okay.
And this individual wants to know what your initial thoughts of Michael Jackson were upon meeting him outside of his stardom.
Why did I think that was coming? You know, I get into any criminal case, and I don't listen to what anybody has said. And I try and learn the way I learn and come to my own conclusions. And of course, the media had already demonized him and deemed him a child molester, and the media was almost salivating over seeing him convicted. And so I met him and I didn't know what to expect, okay? Nor did I want to expect anything. I met him in Florida. It was a secret meeting that the media and nobody else knew about. And I sat in a room with Michael and some other people close to him. He sat in the back. He didn't say a word, but he seemed to be almost looking through me. His eyes were like very powerful and very penetrating. The people around him were asking me questions about who I was and, you know, what I'd done with my career, and et cetera. And I got the impression he was very shy in person, and that impression turned out to be correct. I mean, Michael Jackson could get on stage anywhere in the world with any number of people and be at home. But on a personal level, he was a very kind, sensitive, and very shy person. One of the nicest people I've ever met, one of the most delightful clients I've ever represented, very respectful, very considerate, very nice. When I was in that case, I learned about 3 months before the trial that my sister had terminal cancer, my only sibling. And she went in for, she had a brain tumor and a lung tumor. She went in, had the brain tumor removed. She got out of the hospital, she went home, and there was this enormous bouquet of flowers. She could even fit, it was in front of her door, she could hardly fit it in her condominium. It was from Michael Jackson with a little poem. Very, very kind, nice person, very misunderstood, had a difficult life, you know, was understood to be a genius at the age of 5, was rehearsing till 3 and 4 in the morning, signing contracts, working in clubs on the weekends, felt he never had much of a childhood. And, you know, when I first saw him, he just seemed very mysterious and quiet. Very humble in person, very nice. I think the world of him.
Mr. Mesereau, great to hear the fit between you and your profession. It's really inspiring. And part of what moves me is hearing how fully you have immersed yourself in the world of your clients, of the juries that you pick. And in doing so, you've made clear, even in your story you just told about Michael Jackson, that you seek to come to know people in depth. And in doing that, particularly given your profession, you must have either an intuitive or perhaps even an explicit model of how people work in your mind, a model of personality, of human nature. I don't ask you to play Freud and lay it all out for us, lay out an entire model of how people work, but is there some rule of thumb, some special insight that you found especially valuable as you try to make predictions about how people will behave?
Well, I think you're talking about jury selection primarily. Am I correct? Okay. Okay. Well, jury selection, okay? We have limited time to make choices about people we don't even know. Very limited time. And everybody has these ideas about what they should rely on or what they should do. And in answer to your question, I think with experience and with an interest in people, you learn about ways to pick a jury. And you may or may not be right, but nevertheless, I think those with a certain instinct, a certain experience, and a certain intuition for people, and it comes from an interest in people, tend to do better at that. Now, it's very difficult to talk about stereotypes, yet the reality is criminal lawyers will always look at stereotypes to fall back on when they're trying to pick a jury, because they don't know the person. You know, in federal court, usually judges do the voir dire, and the attorneys can't even ask questions. Some federal judges let us ask a few questions, but most don't. In state court, we have limited time to ask people questions, to find out where they're from, what they're like. Let me give you an example of what I relied on in the Michael Jackson case, okay? I had a jury consultant, which I've not used very often in my career. And the jury consultant, I'd never tried a case in that county, which is Santa Barbara County, which is north of Los Angeles County where I practice. And I was in a largely blue-collar conservative community with a very high conviction rate. And of course, the media was horrific in the way they were treating this case and Mr. Jackson. Now, I knew the client to some extent, as much as I could. The jury consultant did not. The jury consultant was doing what jury consultants do. She was going into the community and obtaining data, okay, and correlating all that data to try and come up with an ideal prosecution juror and an ideal defense juror. She was looking at age, occupation. She was looking at religion, if she could find out. She was looking at, any number of things. And correlating all of this and trying to figure out what an ideal prosecution juror would be in the abstract, what an ideal defense juror would be in the abstract, and the issues that affected both models. What affected both more than anything else was the fact that he had reportedly paid $20 million to settle a case in the early 90s. That bothered everybody, whether they seemed to be pro-defense or pro-prosecution. Okay, so what does she say to me? She says, well, I think we should stay away from women and stay away from mothers. And I looked at her and said, I want women and I want mothers. Okay, now why did I do that? Okay, I had a client whose sexuality was being attacked ruthlessly. I mean, the prosecution had a jury consultant who, throughout the trial, had these prosecutors spinning this mantra, sleeps with little boys, sleeps with little boys, sleeps with little boys. And then when things didn't seem to be going their way, one of these prosecutors was asking these outrageous questions about he's homosexual, he's asexual, he's this, he sleeps with boys. His sexuality was being attacked. Okay, now, in my experience as a defense attorney, obviously, a gay juror would have been fine, but when it came to heterosexuals, who was likely to be more harshly judgmental of him very quickly? Heterosexual men, more than heterosexual women. I looked at him as an eccentric, as a genius who danced to his own drummer, who wasn't quite like anyone else, who had to be explained in that courtroom. And I decided that heterosexual women will be much more receptive to my explanation of who this eccentric genius is than heterosexual men who are quickly judgmental, who aren't as emotionally available, and who may have insecurities about their own sexuality. Okay? So there's an example. I'll tell you another story about when it comes to race in the case, because when I got in the case, Michael was surrounded by black activists who he was reaching out to, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Nation of Islam guards, et cetera, and I said, I want all this out of here, okay? This is not going to resonate well in this community. We're not likely to have one African American on this jury. And I said, this is your community. And plus, when I got to know him and looked at his music and looked at his life, his white children, his Latino child, his statements that he wanted to adopt a child from every continent in the world, his music, doesn't matter if you're black or white. I said, this is a theme that's going to resonate with these white jurors who are squeamish with race to begin with. And I don't want race to be an issue. It's not going to protect you in this courtroom. It might protect you somewhere else. It's not going to protect you here. And he listened. So I think your insight into people, your experiences with juries before, all impacts on what you think you should do in that very limited horizon you have to pick a jury.
Okay, thanks. Sit here, I think sit there. Today at the City Club, we have been enjoying a Friday forum featuring Thomas Mesereau Jr., principal at the Mesereau Law Group and co-founder of the Mesereau Free Clinic. Thank you, Mr. Mesereau. Tom. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.